Shoot the Breeze topic number one says many argue that those who see Kemet as a cradle of Africa are self haters and that West Africa is a cradle in and of itself. What is your argument against this video? So you guys are going to be familiar with the person in the video, I'm sure. Let me share my screen. With you guys. We're going to watch it and then we will comment on it.
Identity and the origin of West African culture. When it comes to discussions about West African identity and the origin of West African cultures, many ideologues promote the Saharan hypothesis that state that the principal ancestors of modern West Africans are the ancient Saharan inhabitants of West Africa that migrated south to coastal Refugia around 5,000 years ago, without any direct association or affiliation with the cultures of the Happy River Valley, particularly the pharaonic culture of ancient Kemet. There are many critical flaws of this hypothesis. Its proponents are engaged in what is called geographic determinism and isolationism through the application of the defunct Garden of Eden principle. In simpler terms, these ideologues believe that the totality of cultures and peoples in West Africa developed from ancient times without any major contributions from other parts of the continent. The one fatal flaw of their thinking is the fact that the Sahara housed cultures associated with every stage of human development: Homo erectus, archaic humans, and modern Homo sapiens sapiens. This doesn't mean that these cultures are directly connected to each other just because of geographic proximity. Massive gaps between the terminal Saharan cultures and the first contemporary states in West Africa exist. For example, there is almost a 1,000-year gap between the end of the Tichik culture and the onset of Ouagadougou. What these researchers miss is the fact that these ancient Saharan hunter-forager populations were subsumed by agropastoralists who migrated into West Africa and developed territorial states from 4 to 1.5 thousand years ago. According to the analysis of Dr. Kevin McDonald, the microlithic cultures of these ancient West Africans, as well as their languages, have been lost. The Jaala people of northeastern Nigeria, who speak a language isolate, are believed to be their direct descendants. In fact, many West Africans have terms for the ancient inhabitants of West Africa that their ancestors met when migrating from the east to their current location. On the flip side, there is a complete absence of a collective memory of the ancient Sahara by most modern West African groups. According to the Dogon, the Yeben and the Andumbu came in the current region first. The Telem came next around the 11th century, and then came the Dogon or Ka'ador around the 16th century in the Bandiagara area. The Mande and Dogon revere the proprietary rites of these ancients in their modern rituals. The Soninke call the 4th century immediate predecessors of the Ouagadougou cultures the Goloma, and refer to the collective groups related to the ancient Tichik culture as the Kokolo, for ancient ones. The Bozo and the Sakarwa fishermen are Mande groups considered the current oldest people in the Niger region, and they both speak about short red men who existed there before them. The Malinke call these people Woklo. The Susu of Guinea speak about diminutive populations called Doki. The Wolof call these ancient West Africans Gondro. And among other Malinke, they were called Komokudumi. Among the Masi, they are called Kinkirsi. Among the Songhai, they are called Adakurma. Among the Gorma, they are called Apola. And among the Kurumba, they are called Atijia. The peoples of Liberia call them Jina. So as you can see, many West Africans have oral traditions and lexical terminology to define the ancient populations that existed in West Africa before them and that they replaced upon migrating into the region. So when we examine the Saharan hypothesis and the material cultural evidence that exists in the Sahara, from artifacts to petroglyphs, the direct links between the ancient Sahara and modern West Africa are restricted to faunal industries, or industries related to animals. Outside of simple propositions about body paint and lithic ornaments, the ancient Saharan cultures do not have much to offer in terms of explanations about the major sociocultural roots of modern Africa. Though the ancient Sahara was a preliminary ancestral step, the Happy River Valley complex is the immediate direct ancestral cradle of the cultures of contemporary Africa. We see this in the common Paleo-African cultural substratum and mode of production seen from classical Kenyan Kush to contemporary Africa. The governing socio-political structure and sovereignty correspondences with respect to the body as a container of forces, seen by the Nasut of Kimi, the Mvun of the grass fields of West Cameroon, the Mogonaba of the Masi, the Kayamaga of Ouagadougou, and the Oheni among the Akan, establish general commonalities. We don't find any descriptive examples of kingship in the ancient Sahara. The systematic theology using Dr. Leo Luca's solar epistemology correspondences between the transcendent one, the creator, and the eternal verb, seen in the Happy River Valley divination systems, the Lakam systems of the Grassfields people of West Cameroon, the Odinani system of the Igbo, and the Ifa of the Yoruba, also establish commonalities between the pharaonic civilizations and contemporary West Africans, and more particularly the near identical components between the Ama divination system of the Ka'ador or Dogon people of West Africa and the Ama divination system of Kimi and Kush cannot be explained using ancient Saharan petroglyphs during the Bovidian pastoral period. So they're basically too close, the Dogon spiritual systems and the systems of ancient Kimi and Kush, to just simply chalk it off to an ancient Saharan bond. It's a more recent direct bond that speaks to an east to west migration across the Sahel that the ancestors of the Dogon people traveled. The archaeology of the Neolithic Sahara does not match the founding narratives of the first West African states. The relatively peaceful Chepka period of the ancient Tichik culture, for example, does not correspond to the founding warfare narratives of the Ouagadougou Empire. Those scholars such as Hole have attempted to use geographic determinism and rainmaking as a mediator of stress in the power of the snake deity Bida. Rain for Dinka Sise and the founders of the Ouagadougou functions in tandem with the recurring natural phenomenon. Rainmaking alone is not enough to establish ethnogenesis specifically for the Soninke, because this power and process exists in the same fashion among the Serer and the Fulani. We can't use this to say that they also descend from Tichit. And on the flip side, rainmaking alone does not explain the many other deities within the Soninke pantheon and their role in the founding of Ouagadougou. The toponymic network, where we see place names like Kimi, Kaukau, and Gara in Eastern Africa being exported to West Africa as Kumbi, Gao, and Gara, also show basic commonalities speaking to this migratory origin. Epigraphs and the grapheme analog seen between Mendudunter and the many West and Central African writing systems like Akauku of the Bamum, Nsibidi of the Ejagam and Igbo people, as well as other cross-river peoples, speaks to a direct relationship. And this is important due to Dr. Musa Lamb's architectonic analysis of the spatio-temporal evolution of agricultural and aquatic toolkits from the Happy River Valley prototypes that developed into forms that we now see in West and Central Africa. And this evolution, uncovered by Dr. Musa Lamb, reaches a delicacy that excludes the possibility of parallelism. The Mur farming tool developed from a plant fiber-braced timber prototype in ancient Kimi and Kush to a rivet-fastened metallic tool in Senegambia. The Kanjandu and Ilir garden hose were used for saturated soils. The weaved wicker baskets of the Happy River Valley evolved into timber bowls defined by grip handles in Senegambia. The harpoon instruments of ancient Kimi developed into nylon coinoidal tools in Senegambia that firmly connect the harpoon to the shaft. Lost wax casting systems developed from Happy River Valley prototypes to inter-African innovations from Ghana to Cameroon, where crucible attachments were used to control the gas pressure and metallurgical flow during the casting process. The Ngulu sword of Congo evolved from the Kopes sword in ancient Kimi, developing a non-cutting back edge with semicircular concavity. The handle is wrapped in wires and contains 3 timber spheres. The Heka scepter of ancient Kimi evolved into the Hogan scepter of Mali, with an inflected hook, a midpoint disc handle, and a sharpened endpoint. A variation of this design is the Hogan Kabyline scepter. The Was scepter prototype of ancient Kimi developed into a uniquely fabricated, freshly trimmed beam placed in fire to augment its elasticity and treated with oil to augment its material resistance and aesthetic qualities. The Happy River Valley headrest evolved into anthropomorphic models throughout Africa while retaining the same composition, base, and upright hanger. Urban societies and the structural tectonics of building systems of modern Africa find many roots in the first dynasty of ancient Kemet. Because the Green Sahara existed prior to the urbanization period, the roots of contemporary African infrastructure cannot be found there. Through an extensive comparative archaeological and historical analysis, it is clear that one must place both the Sahara and the Happy in its proper context. Though the Green Sahara, with its Roundhead, Kiphian, and Tenarian cultures, does offer valuable understanding in terms of the foundational, aqualithic, and pastoral ancestry of Kemi and Kush, it cannot fully articulate the full origins and evolutionary roots of contemporary Africa. The Pharaonic civilization, however, is where we find a mass compendium of evidence that proves that it is the immediate cultural cradle of the majority of Africa's modern cultures.
All right, so that's Kamji verse. I suspect this brother's doing his thesis, or he's writing a book on this stuff, because this is a constant topic for him. In the chat, Trigger Happy says all of those groups that he was naming closer to the beginning of the video, uh, that were ancient inhabitants, is what we would call the Twa. So I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with that term, the Twa. Uh, that's who all those different names of people were. Now, personally, I'll just say this before I throw it to the panel. My understanding has been for some time now that most of Africa comes from Kemet, where this, when Kemet fell, folks, in fact, I think me and Carl did this in one of our book club readings. Most of those people from Kemet, as it fell, they started to run or flee into other parts of Africa, going as far as West Africa, etc. So, that's my understanding of modern day West Africans and their origins. But I guess there's people who argue differently. So let's see what the panel has to say about it. Let me start off with Buana. Buana, what say you?
You start with me. Um, I kind of agree. I agree with Kemji verse. From what I know in terms of man, where man comes from. I heard we came from out of Ethiopia, really. In science actually finding the first man, and it's through that I really thought that Ethiopia or East Africa in that particular region, that would have that their civilizations would have been older than Kemet. This is how I understood it. And from that area they spread out towards Kemet, the Kemet area, and then you see a degree of development and what happened in the Sudan and in Egypt and so forth. And as you suggested, when that particular civilization fell, the culture and some of the people, not all, some of the people actually came south. So this is how I kind of understood it. But in reading people like Shakanta Diop, he kind of like verifies a lot of what Kenji Verse was saying. What I would seek to with the scholars, historians in particular, Western historians, Black historians, is that they do a whole lot of field work, because it seemed to me that a lot of what Kenji Verse premises is based off of scholarly articles, academia, and it's sometimes good to really get a real analysis by going on the ground and finding out, doing some field work in terms of whether their hypothesis is verified, if it's right or if it's not right. Another thing too is, learning some of the languages as well. I think the linguistics is a good way of making some good connections in terms of what he proposes in some of these videos. I think that's a good thing. I think that Obadeli Cameron does a good job of that. And I think that a lot of our Western historians and academics, we really need to do a lot of the field work, really just to get some solid foundation in terms of what they speculating by third parties, these theoreticians and historians and things of that nature. I think that'll be good for us to do these kinds of things. But this is not by no means my level of expertise at all. So I'll just pass this on to the other brothers who I feel is probably much more competent than me on this particular subject.
Yeah, Kanjiverse on Twitter often talks about the Bantu and all these different classifications and stuff like that. That goes a little bit over my head. I'll be honest. I haven't really studied these different groups of ancient Africans and their migration practices, etc. So kudos to that brother. But let's go to Oni. Let's see if Oni can shed some more light on it. Oni would say.
Yeah, I think the brother's insights are on point, obviously. I do want to talk about what Bana said about Ethiopia. The Ethiopia thing was from like way back, So Kemet is obviously, like ancient Egypt is obviously like, let's say 5,000 years ago. But like ancient Ethiopia is like 200,000 years. You know what I mean? Like it's not even in the same, that's not even like that's just far back. So I think that's where he's talking about like the advanced civilization of ancient Egypt and how the people kind of like what Bit of Medicine was talking about, where the people are they spread out from the fall of Kemet type thing, or they just spread out. And that's the thing that I really think is interesting because there's two parts to this. There's one is, did the people come from it or did the ideas come from it? And that's something that's hard to tell the difference between, because you could always have some ideologues come out of Egypt, and it doesn't have to be a great population, right? And you would still see the same sort of like physical evidence of cultural transfer, right? So, just to keep it simple, I'll say this. A lot of us have in our houses, I have it on the floor, but a lot of us have it on in our houses, the European Bible, right? And in this Bible, right, they talk about like the Bible is centered around, at least the Old Testament, right, is centered around a guy who studies in Egypt. Okay? It's centered around a guy who studies in Egypt and takes his studies and creates a people with his studies, through his studies. Like basically he goes to a university, he studies for a while, and then he comes back and he starts his own people group, right? And like I think that might have been a common practice in the ancient world. Because when you look at Yoruba, right, they have the same story. Now, whether the Yoruba are in mass descended from ancient Egypt, we don't know. But what we can try to understand, or what seems to be indicative from the evidence, is that Orunmila, the quote unquote prophet of the Yoruba faith, seems to have studied in Egypt. So my impression of Egypt actually might be that it was a big like it had a really advanced university at the time that may have educated people on nation building, let's say, right? And that's why you have stories of like say the Greeks learning in Egypt, or you have stories of this character Moses learning in Egypt, and of course you have Orunmila learning in Egypt, and you could also see the branching, like the similarities of their philosophies and thoughts as well. And so that I think that's something that we kind of underestimate. Just this idea that you have this world-renowned university system on the continent of Africa, and then we're supposing that nobody outside of the European world went to this Europe. Like nobody outside of Egypt except for Europeans, and of course, Asians. Only foreigners, pretty much, to the continent went to this university, and that's where things kind of fall apart. And this is why, like a lot of people, I think Controversy is right to say that a lot of people are, geographic isolationists. and I think that like as soon as you like, of course I also note that it's very speculative, so we can't really say anything definitively, but at the same time, um but like as he does, as he presents the evidence and as he shows the linguistic relationship, that's a really high level type of evincing, I'd say, and that's all I'd say.
Only that's a good. In fact, I'll even give it a great point you made in there, which is we know about the Greeks and whatnot who studied 40 years, 20, 40, 50 years in Kemet. But I think it's true what you said. I think many of us kind of overlook that, Africans was going to Kemet to learn too from all over where, wherever Africans were. I think that's an excellent point. I think we do overlook that point. So thanks for that. Carl, what say you?
Well, I think I understand what they're saying. The post made a I'm thinking of what I read, The African Origin of Civilization by Sheikh Anta Diop. And I think if we go back even before, the first dynasty of Egypt, the beginning of the Old Kingdom, we can see that even prehistorically, the Sahara was not a desert. It was more like a savanna. So what happened, I believe, that as the climate generally got drier, the Sahara region became desert, and the people who inhabited that area, some of them went east to the Nile, some of them went, into West Africa. But I think that it kind of all comes from a general, foundational seed of a people. And that's why there's a lot of knowledge, is shared. I find that some people, when they try to say that black people focus on Kemet too much, I think that they're just speaking out of ignorance, because there's so much cross pollination of the different cultures, in Africa. Just like, Europeans look at ancient Greece as the foundation of their culture, of their, philosophy and everything else. When Africans look at Kemet as the foundation of our philosophy and our history and our culture, we're mocked. Well, you guys weren't Egyptians. You lived in West Africa, while ignoring the role that Kemet played in West Africa, and also vice versa. It's believed that, the process to create iron was originally created in West and Central Africa and brought to Kemet. I believe the Egyptians mentioned, I'm sorry, people of Kemet mentioned that their home was in the source of the Nile, where the god Hapi dwelled. And the source of the Nile is in the Great Lakes of Africa, that believe in I think in Uganda. So there's so much information, so much knowledge out there that shows that it wasn't just isolated, and that Kemet had no influence on the rest of the continent. There was a lot of information, a lot of things that were passed back and forth. People went to study there. They got their knowledge from there. So I don't think that we're, any type of pseudo history or anything like that to claim Kemet, because there's a lot of influence that they had across the whole continent. All right, I'll stop there. Thanks, Coco.
So this is for all of you. Anyone can answer this. Now that we understand, or have a better understanding that, West Africans today are not the original people in that region, and we have ties to Kemet, what next? Now that we have this information, what do we do with it? Anyone can answer.
The only thing it tells me, when you look at things like this, is it's almost as if we are saying that great men could be great again. If you could create great civilizations back then, if you could organize and produce the things that you could have done back then you could reproduce that. You know, they say that Trump in his career, he become bankrupt. He went bankrupt. He had no money in a proverbial sense. But a month, 2 months, 3 months later, he had the ingenuity and the know-how to become a billionaire. Yeah, and so I think that these are things that we could preface as lessons in terms of moving forward. Great men once could be great again, you know, and the system, the Western system, always tells of the greatness of their empires, what they produced, the things that they was able to accomplish within their lifetimes. You know, they give this to the young westernized child, you know, white face, blonde eye, blue hair, or whatever. So he looks into this big wide world and he says to himself, oh, okay, so I'm just really following daddy's business. I'm just really about my father's business. Because if my fathers would have been at the head of all civilizations, we are the dominant force of the world, then I'm just gonna come into this world and practice the same kinds of things, create the same kinds of institutions, reproduce all the things that my fathers would have done back then. You know, this is what the white child tells himself. So I think that the black child, in looking at this kinds of information, should look at the world differently. But we don't have our own view of the world as yet. You know, we're working on that. But I think that a young black child, just looking just like me and you, when he looks out at this big wide world, he should come up with the same kind of analysis and premise. You know, these great men was able to produce these things and they look just like me. Therefore, the logical conclusion is I should be able to accomplish the same kind of feats. So that's what I think that we should do with this kind of information. But as the scientist is doing right now in Florida, it's not that he's turning the dial back 50 years. He's just trying to recreate his history. So I think that, you know, we should protect our history. We should protect the things that we believe is going to make us great in this world and tell it and pass it on to our forebears. So they should just carry on the tradition that we've been given, this kind of information, because it's a battle right now to get rid of this information. They want to get rid of this. You know, they want to segment the mind of the black male and female into the idea of you as just slaves. That's it. No history before it. No great history after it. You are just a slave relegated to second class status in the world. You know, so the premise with us is to break that idea and give our children or grandchildren more of than what they've been given so far, because maybe they will be able to reproduce these kinds of things that's been invented in the world by the black mind and the black mind. That's what I think is useful for. But I'll end there.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bwana. I do think that there are real attempts to distort history, and I think that many times Black people have been taught that we haven't really contributed anything to civilization, and that white people did us a favor by enslaving us. You know, the whole thing that you mentioned, the governor of Florida now these teaching that slaves learned skills during slavery, as if Africans didn't already have skills. And that's what made them attractive to enslavers. So I think with this knowledge, you know, you can begin to push back on some of the white supremacist rhetoric that's being pushed in academia. And also, again, like you said, we were great once before, we can be great again, you know. For the majority of this planet's history, Black people were running this. You know, the fact that white people are dominating the planet is really an anomaly of history. For most of civilized history, the black people were the world power. So I think that's something we can really take from that.
Yeah, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said, if you begin your history at slavery, then everything looks like progress. You know, I think the reason why Brother Controverse is promoting this is because today a lot of us are very tribalistic. You know, you like, even if we really focus at the main thrust of it, like the quote unquote ADOS movement is really just a tribalistic movement. Like Black tribalism is rampant, and it's worse. In fact, it's at its worst in West Africa. You know, it's pretty bad in East Africa. I heard, for instance, I hear that in Kenya it's pretty bad. But like, really, I think that's where it comes back to. It's this idea that no, we're not different people. No, like, we're not, like, this tribal stuff is not where it's at. You know, if we get together, we can do not even saying if we get together we can do amazing things, which is something that you would like to hear, obviously. But it's really get together, you know, or stop with the tribal bullcrap. Stop with the, hey, look, I'm here and you're there. Let's fight each other. Let's compete with each other. Let's so on and so forth. It comes back to, you know, let's just get together. And the thing about Kemet too that a lot of us overlook is that it stands for, some people say the black land, some people say the black community, you know. Now some people will reason, hey, they're talking about the fertile soil, right? But some people also reason that, you know, they're talking about the people, you know. And I mean, obviously that is its own little debate, but it's not that important. You know, what's really important is that Black people came together to create one of the best nations in human history. Okay, one of the best nations, if not the best nation in human history. So, you know, if nothing else, us being divided shouldn't be a thing. Let me just read what Trigger Happy wrote. He says, "Oh, you don't forget about the tribalism is happening because of language groupings and race science. When we buy into their definitions, we have a weaker Pan Africanism." Yeah, East Africans believe they are Hamites. West Africans believe they are mystical Negro Congo speakers who are the true Negroes. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like we have to, I think that's what this knowledge does. This knowledge, like, obviously it's not a blueprint for how to create a excellent nation, but what it tells us is, hey, look, you're actually the same people as the people of the East. So stop trying to separate yourself, West Africa, and just be African like the rest of us.
Well said, guys. Well said. I appreciate all the responses to that. Trigger Happy had a lot to say. I put it up on the screen. Only read the last two comments. I just want to shout out Brother Bakari, who's in the chat, saying peace and black power to the KWAZ radio family. Real Black Gentleman says, I sound ancient. What's up, fam? I don't know, it might be I have these fans running, so maybe my voice isn't sounding the greatest right now. But I'm here and I'm good. Is there any last words on that prompt? Because if not, I can go to Shoot the Breeze topic number 2 tonight. All right, seems like there's no last words here. So, the name, okay. Now I got you. Oh, greetings to the matron. The matron's out there in the chat. Thanks for coming through, matron. Good to see you.